The terminal hums with the quiet rhythm of a midnight shift. A man in oil-stained coveralls walks across the tarmac, tool bag over his shoulder, badge clipped to his chest. 30 years of service, 3 commendations, a security clearance most people in this airport will never have. His name is Elijah Turner. He keeps the planes flying. Tonight, 2 officers are waiting for him at gate 12. "Sir, we need to see your papers." Elijah stops. His hands stay visible. His breathing stays even. "My badge is right here." "Not your badge. Your citizenship documents, proof you belong in this country." Behind him, the aircraft he just serviced prepares for departure. 200 passengers who will never know his name. In front of him, 2 men who have already decided what he is. They see a threat. They have no idea what they're looking at. The hangar was silent, except for the hum of industrial lights overhead. 2 in the morning. The world outside slept, but here, beneath the belly of a Boeing 737, Elijah Turner worked. His hands moved with the precision of a man who had done this 10,000 times. Socket wrench turning, bolts checked, hydraulic lines inspected, every motion deliberate, every step documented. 30 years, 30 years of nights like this. The graveyard shift suited him. No crowds, no small talk, just the work and the quiet hum of machines waiting to fly. Elijah was 54 years old, tall, broad-shouldered. His coveralls were stained with grease and wear, but his boots were polished. His badge hung from a lanyard around his neck, Level 4 security clearance, the highest tier an airport maintenance engineer could hold. Most people didn't know what Level 4 meant. They didn't need to. They just needed their planes to fly safely. That was Elijah's job, making sure they did. He slid out from beneath the aircraft, wiping his hands on a rag. The maintenance log sat on his cart, already filled with his neat handwriting. Every check, every measurement, every adjustment. Footsteps echoed across the concrete floor. Elijah looked up. A young technician approached, early 20s, nervous energy, grease on his face but not yet on his soul. "Mr. Turner, sorry to bother you." Elijah waited. "I've got a hydraulic pressure issue on the Airbus at gate 7. The readings are fluctuating, but I can't find the source. I've checked the lines 3 times." Elijah set down his rag. "Show me." They walked together through the hangar, past aircraft in various stages of inspection. The younger man talked as they walked, explaining what he'd tried, what he'd ruled out, what didn't make sense. Elijah listened without interrupting. When they reached the Airbus, Elijah didn't go to the hydraulic lines. He went to the landing gear assembly. He crouched, ran his fingers along a connector joint and stopped. "Here." The young technician leaned in. "What is it?" "Microfracture in the seal. You can't see it with your eyes, but you can feel it if you know what you're looking for. Pressure bleeds out here, affects the readings downstream." The technician stared. "How did you?" "Replace the seal, run the diagnostic again. It'll hold." Elijah stood, brushed off his knees, and walked back toward his own station. He didn't wait for thanks, didn't need them. The hangar returned to silence. Elijah finished his shift log, gathered his tools, and walked to the locker room. The metal door of his locker opened with a familiar creak. Inside, a clean uniform, a spare flashlight, a faded photograph taped to the back wall, a younger Elijah in Air Force dress blues standing beside a massive C-17 Globemaster. Behind him, a row of men and women in matching uniforms. A unit, a family. Tucked behind the photograph, barely visible, a chain of dog tags caught the fluorescent light. Next to them, a folded American flag in a triangle case. Small, personal, the kind they give to families at funerals. Elijah didn't touch any of it. He never did. He closed the locker, pulled on his jacket, and checked his watch. Shift over. Time to go home. He walked through the employee corridor toward the terminal. The airport was quiet at this hour, cleaning crews, a few security guards, the distant echo of an announcement no one was listening to. Elijah moved without hurry, his footsteps steady, his mind already thinking about breakfast, about sleep, about the next shift. He didn't know what was waiting for him at Gate 12. He didn't know that in 5 minutes, 30 years of service wouldn't matter. He didn't know that tonight, his country would ask him to prove he belonged. The corridor stretched ahead, fluorescent lights casting pale shadows on the linoleum floor. Elijah walked with his hands at his sides, tool bag over his shoulder, badge visible on his chest. The same walk he'd taken 1,000 times, the same route, the same silence. He saw them before they saw him. 2 officers stood near the junction, where the employee corridor met. The main terminal, airport police, uniformed, one leaning against the wall, arms crossed, the other checking his phone. Elijah noted their positions without changing his stride, an old habit, one he'd never lost. They looked up as he approached. Something shifted in their posture, subtle. The phone went into a pocket, the crossed arms uncrossed. "Sir, hold up a moment." Elijah stopped, his hand stayed visible, his expression stayed neutral. "Is there a problem?" The taller officer stepped forward, white, mid-30s, clean-shaven, his name tag read PATTRSON. "We received a report about an unauthorized individual in the restricted maintenance area." Elijah blinked once. "I'm a maintenance engineer. I work in that area." "ID." Elijah reached slowly for his badge. He unclipped it from the lanyard and held it out. The officer took it, glanced at it, then handed it to his partner. The second officer, shorter, stockier, name tag Williams, studied the badge without reading it. His eyes moved from the photo to Elijah's face, back to the photo, back to Elijah. "This your only identification?" "My employee number is on the badge. My security clearance is level 4. You can verify both through the operations center." Patterson tilted his head slightly. "Level 4, that's a high clearance." "It's required for my position." "And what position is that?" "Aircraft systems engineer. I service the planes you see on the tarmac." A pause. The 2 officers exchanged a glance. Something unspoken passed between them. Williams handed the badge back to Patterson. He didn't return it to Elijah. "Where were you born?" The question landed like a stone, dropped into still water. Elijah felt it ripple through him. He kept his face still. "Chicago." "You have documentation of that?" "My birth certificate is at home. My passport is at home. My employee file, which you can access, contains all of my verified personal information." Patterson stepped closer. Not aggressive, not yet, but closer. "We're going to need to see some documentation, something that confirms your citizenship." Elijah's jaw tightened, a fraction, just enough for him to feel it. "I've worked at this airport for 30 years. I've held a top-level security clearance for 20 of them. I've been vetted by the TSA, the FAA, and the Department of Homeland Security." "That's not what I asked." "You asked if I'm a citizen. I am. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, Cook County Hospital, 1970. Williams shifted his weight. His hand drifted toward his belt, not to his weapon, to his radio. "We're going to need you to come with us, sir." Elijah stood very still. He knew this moment. He had lived it before, in different uniforms, on different ground. The moment when power decides what you are before it asks who you are. He had a choice. He could refuse, demand a supervisor, cite the law, assert his rights. Or he could survive. Elijah looked at Patterson, then at Williams, then at the corridor behind them where a cleaning crew had stopped mopping to watch, where a gate agent stood frozen, phone in hand, already recording. He took a breath, let it out slowly. "Fine, lead the way." He didn't resist. He walked with them, past the cleaning crew, past the gate agent, past the windows where his serviced aircraft sat ready for the morning's first flight. 200 passengers would board that plane in 4 hours. They would trust that it was safe, that someone had checked every bolt, every wire, every system. They would never know his name. And right now, neither did the officers escorting him to a room where names didn't matter, only the color of skin and the weight of assumption. The security office was at the end of a corridor most passengers never saw. No windows, no signs, just a steel door with a keypad and a small camera mounted above the frame. Patterson swiped his badge. The door clicked open. The room inside was functional. A metal table, 4 chairs, a phone on the wall, a camera in the corner with a blinking red light. "Have a seat." Elijah sat. His hands rested flat on the table, visible, controlled. Patterson remained standing. Williams closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. "Let's start again, full name." Elijah Marcus Turner. Date of birth: September 14, 1970. Place of birth: Chicago, Illinois. Patterson wrote nothing down. He just watched. "You said you have a passport." "At home, yes." "Why don't you carry it?" Elijah kept his voice level. "Because I don't need it to go to work. I have a badge. I have a security clearance. I have an employee file that was verified when I was hired and re-verified every 2 years since. Those can be forged." Elijah's eyes met Patterson's. "My fingerprints are in the federal database. My face is in the biometric system. You can confirm my identity in 90 seconds with one phone call." Patterson didn't make the call. Williams spoke from the door. "We. Ray in the restricted area." "I work in the restricted area. That's where the planes are." "Anyone see you working tonight?" "The entire shift is logged. Every action I took is documented. Every aircraft I touched has a maintenance record with my signature." "That doesn't prove you were supposed to be there." Elijah felt the familiar weight settle into his chest. The weight of being questioned not because of what you did, but because of what you are. He had carried this weight before. On traffic stops that lasted too long. In airports where his boarding pass was checked twice while others walked through. In rooms where his uniform wasn't enough, where his record wasn't enough, where nothing was ever enough. "I've been employed here for 30 years, Elijah said slowly. "I've held a level 4 security clearance since 2004. I have access to every maintenance facility on this property. If you call the operations center, they will confirm all of this in under 2 minutes." Patterson leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "We'll verify what we need to verify. But right now, you're going to stay here until we sort this out." "Am I being detained?" A pause. "You're being held for questioning." "On what grounds?" "Suspicious activity in a restricted area." "What suspicious activity? I was doing my job." Williams stepped away from the door. His hand rested on his radio. "Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down." Elijah hadn't raised his voice, hadn't moved. His hands were still flat on the table, exactly where he'd placed them. But he understood. In this room, calm wasn't something you demonstrated. It was something they decided you lacked. He took a breath, held it, released it slowly. "I'm calm. I've been calm. I'm asking a simple question. What is the legal basis for holding me?" Patterson straightened. "We received a report. We're following protocol." "What report, from whom?" No answer. "What did the report say?" Silence. Elijah nodded slowly. He understood now. There was no report, or if there was, it said nothing specific, nothing that would survive scrutiny. This wasn't about security. It wasn't about protocol. This was about suspicion, the kind that didn't need evidence, the kind that attached itself to people who looked like him and never let go. He folded his hands on the table, straightened his spine. "I'll wait." Patterson and Williams exchanged a glance. They left the room without another word. The door locked behind them. Elijah sat alone in the silence, the camera's red light blinking overhead, and waited for a country he had served for 22 years to decide whether he was allowed to exist within its borders. Time moved differently in rooms without windows. Elijah sat motionless at the steel table, his hands still flat on the surface, his breathing slow and measured. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, a constant, droning hum that filled the silence. He didn't know how long he'd been here. An hour, maybe two. His watch had been taken during processing, so had his phone, his badge, his tool bag. Everything that proved who he was, confiscated and placed in a plastic bin somewhere beyond that locked door. He had asked for a phone call. The request was noted but not granted. He had asked for his supervisor to be contacted. The request was acknowledged but not acted upon. He had asked if he was under arrest. The answer was a careful non-answer. "You're being held for verification." Verification. Elijah turned the word over in his mind. He had been verified more times than he could count. Background checks, security screenings, fingerprint scans, biometric databases. The federal government knew more about him than he knew about himself. But none of that mattered in this room. In this room, he was a question mark, a suspicion, a body that didn't belong until someone decided it did. The door opened. A different officer this time, older, gray at the temples, no name tag visible. He sat across from Elijah without introduction. "Let's go through this again. We've been through it. We'll go through it until we're satisfied." Elijah met his eyes. Satisfied with what? The officer opened a folder. Inside, Elijah could see a photocopy of his badge, a printout of his employee information, a photograph, his own face, staring back at him from an official document. "You claim you were born in Chicago." "I don't claim it, it's a fact." "Do you have documentation to support that?" "I've answered this question 3 times. My documentation is at home. My verified records are in your system." The officer made a note in the folder. "Your accent, where did you pick that up?" Elijah blinked. "I don't have an accent." "You sure about that?" "I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I served 22 years in the United States Air Force. If I have an accent, it's American." The officer studied him. Elijah studied him back. He had seen men like this before. Men who had decided something was true before they entered the room, and now searched for evidence to justify what they already believed. The questions continued. Where did his parents come from? Chicago, both of them. Did he have family overseas? No. Had he ever traveled to Africa? Once, a military assignment. Did he have contacts in foreign countries? He had served alongside allied forces from 12 nations. Did that count? Each answer was noted. Each answer seemed to deepen the suspicion rather than resolve it. Elijah understood the game. They weren't looking for truth. They were looking for a mistake, a hesitation, a contradiction, something they could use to justify what they had already done. He gave them nothing. His voice stayed level, his hands stayed visible, his posture stayed straight. 22 years in the Air Force had taught him many things: how to service an aircraft, how to lead a team, how to stay calm when the world around you was falling apart. But the most important lesson, the one that had kept him alive, was simpler than all of that. Stillness was survival. The door opened again. Patterson and Williams returned, flanking the older officer. "We're going to need to hold you a little longer." "How much longer?" "Until we complete our verification." "Your verification should have taken 5 minutes." "These things take time." Elijah looked at each of them in turn. 3 men in uniform, 3 men with authority. 3 men who had decided he was guilty of something and would keep him here until they figured out what. He thought about his wife, Sarah. She would be awake by now, wondering where he was. He hadn't missed a call home in 30 years. He thought about his daughter, Maya, 26 years old, a lawyer. She would know exactly how wrong this was, and she would be powerless to stop it. He thought about the planes on the tarmac, the passengers who would board them today, the lives that depended on work done by people like him, invisible, unrecognized, essential. And he thought about the flag in his locker, the one they gave him when his brother didn't come home from Iraq. His brother had died for this country, and now this country was asking Elijah to prove he belonged in it. He lowered his head, just for a moment, just long enough to breathe. Then he looked up again. "I'll wait." The door slammed open at 6:14 a.m. Elijah didn't flinch. He had trained himself long ago to absorb sudden noise without reaction. Flinching showed fear. Fear invited escalation. He looked up slowly. A woman stood in the doorway, mid-50s, black suit, silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her badge read MARLENEVANCE, Director, Airport Security. Behind her, Patterson and Williams stood frozen. Their earlier confidence was gone. Something had changed. Vance stepped into the room. Her heels clicked against the concrete floor, sharp, deliberate, authoritative. She carried a manila folder, thick, worn at the edges. She didn't sit. "Mr. Turner, I'm Marlene Vance. I apologize for not being here sooner. I was not informed of your detention until 20 minutes ago." Elijah said nothing. He waited. Vance turned to face Patterson and Williams. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice carried the weight of controlled fury. "Do either of you want to explain to me why a 30-year employee with a Level 4 security clearance was held in this room for 4 hours without a supervisor being notified?" Patterson opened his mouth, closed it. Williams stared at the floor. Vance turned back to Elijah. She opened the folder and began reading aloud. Elijah Marcus Turner, born September 14, 1970, Chicago, Illinois, Cook County Hospital, mother Dorothy Turner, father James Turner, both deceased. She turned a page. Enlisted in the United States Air Force, 1988, basic training at Lackland, technical training at Shepherd Air Force Base, specialty, aircraft systems maintenance. Another page. Assigned to multiple installations including Ramstein Air Base, Germany, Asan Air Base, South Korea, Al-Udeid Air Base, Qatar, 3 deployments to Iraq, 2 deployments to Afghanistan. She paused, looked at Patterson. "Are you following this, Officer Patterson?" Patterson's face had gone pale. He nodded once. Vance continued. Rank at retirement, Master Sergeant. Years of service, 22. Awards include Meritorious Service Medal, Air Force Commendation Medal twice, Air Force Achievement Medal 3 times, and, she looked up, a Bronze Star for Valor during a combat mission in Kandahar Province, 2008. The room was silent. Vance closed the folder. "Mr. Turner's security clearance is top secret SCI. That clearance required an FBI background investigation that took 18 months to complete. Every member of his family was interviewed. Every address he ever lived at was verified. Every contact he ever had was scrutinized." She stepped closer to Patterson. "His citizenship was verified before you were out of high school. His loyalty to this country was documented before you ever put on that badge. And you held him in this room for 4 hours because you didn't bother to make one phone call." Patterson's jaw tightened. "We were following protocol." "You were following your assumptions." Vance's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Protocol would have required you to verify his credentials through the operations center. Protocol would have required you to contact a supervisor. Protocol would have required you to document the basis for detention before you detained anyone. She pointed at the folder. This man serviced aircraft for the United States military in combat zones. He has held clearances that require him to be trusted with national security secrets. And you put him in a room and asked him to prove he was born in this country. Silence. Vance turned to Elijah. Her expression softened just slightly. Mr. Turner, you're free to go. I will personally ensure this incident is documented and reviewed. You have my word. Elijah looked at her for a long moment, then at Patterson, then at Williams. He didn't feel vindicated. He didn't feel relieved. He felt tired. He stood slowly. His joints ached from hours of sitting in the same position. My belongings. Vance nodded to Williams. Get them now. Williams left the room. Patterson followed, unable to meet Elijah's eyes. Elijah stood alone with Vance in the silence. Thank you, he said quietly. Vance shook her head. Don't thank me, this should never have happened. Elijah didn't argue. She was right. The morning sun was blinding. Elijah stepped out of the security corridor and into the main terminal, shielding his eyes with one hand. The world outside the detention room was loud, announcements echoing, travelers rushing, the hum of a city waking up. He had been in that room for nearly 5 hours. It felt longer. His belongings had been returned in a plastic bin. Badge, phone, wallet, tool bag, everything accounted for, nothing apologized for. He clipped his badge back to his lanyard. It felt heavier now. His phone buzzed. 17 missed calls. Sarah, Maya, his supervisor, numbers he didn't recognize. He didn't check the messages, not yet. He walked toward the employee exit, moving through the terminal like a ghost. Passengers passed him without a glance. Gate agents announced departures. Life continued as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. He could feel it in the way people looked at him now, or didn't. In the way a TSA agent near the checkpoint quickly looked away when Elijah met her eyes. In the way a cleaning crew member gave him a small nod, then kept moving. Word had spread. He pushed through the exit doors and stopped. 2 people were waiting for him. The first was his shift supervisor, Dennis Cabrera, 50 years old, 17 years at the airport, a man who said little but meant everything he said. The second was a woman Elijah didn't recognize, early 40s, tailored gray suit, natural hair pulled back, silver earrings catching the light. She held a leather briefcase and stood with the posture of someone who spent her life in courtrooms. Dennis stepped forward first. Eli, you okay? Elijah nodded. He didn't trust his voice yet. The woman approached. Mr. Turner, my name is Grace Oyelaran. I'm an attorney specializing in civil rights cases. She handed him a card. I'd like to speak with you when you're ready. Elijah looked at the card, then at her. How did you know I was here? Grace gestured toward the terminal doors. Through the glass, Elijah could see news vans setting up in the passenger pickup area. Cameras, reporters, lights. Someone recorded your detention. It's already online. Over 100,000 views in the last 2 hours. Elijah's chest tightened. He had spent his entire adult life avoiding attention. In the military, he let his work speak for itself. At the airport, he preferred the graveyard shift because it meant fewer people, fewer eyes, fewer questions. Now his face was on the internet. His name was in strangers' mouths. His worst moment was being played and replayed for an audience he would never meet. I didn't ask for this. I know, Grace's voice was calm, measured, but it's here, and what happens next is up to you. Dennis put a hand on Elijah's shoulder. Take some time, go home, rest. The department isn't expecting you back today. Elijah shook his head. I don't need time. Eli, I need to go home, see my wife, then I need to think. Grace nodded. When you're ready, call me. This is a decision only you can make, but I want you to know what happened to you wasn't just wrong, it was illegal, and there are options. Elijah pocketed the card without looking at it. He walked past the cameras without speaking, past the reporters shouting his name, past the world that had suddenly decided he was worth paying attention to. He got into his car, sat in the driver's seat, didn't start the engine. Through the windshield, he could see the runway. A plane was taking off, smooth, steady, rising into the morning sky. He had serviced that plane last week, checked every system, signed every log. The passengers on board would never know his name. And right now, that anonymity felt like the only thing he had left. Grace Oyelaren's office was on the 14th floor of a downtown high-rise. Elijah sat across from her desk, still wearing the clothes he'd had on for nearly 30 hours. Sarah had wanted him to sleep first. He couldn't. His mind wouldn't stop. The office was clean, organized, walls lined with framed newspaper clippings, court documents, photographs of Grace with clients whose names Elijah didn't know but whose faces told stories of struggle and survival. Grace sat behind her desk, hands folded, waiting. "You don't have to decide today," she said. "I know, but you want to understand your options." "Yes." She opened a folder. Inside, Elijah could see photographs, stills from the video. His own face expressionless. His own hands flat on the table. His own body seated in a room where his rights had been quietly stripped away. "The case is strong," Grace began. "Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful detention without probable cause, civil rights infringement under Section 1983, racial profiling in violation of the Equal Protection Clause." Elijah listened. He didn't interrupt. "We can also pursue claims for emotional distress, damage to reputation, and loss of employment standing, though I understand you haven't lost your job." "Not yet." Grace nodded. "The airport authority will want to settle, quietly. They'll offer money in exchange for your silence, a confidential agreement you sign, you move on, the story disappears." "How much?" "Hard to say before negotiations, but based on similar cases, likely 7 figures, maybe more." Elijah stared at the photographs, at his own face, at the blinking red light of the camera that had recorded everything. "And if I don't settle?" "Then we go to trial. It takes longer. 18 months, maybe 2 years. It's harder, more public, more painful. You'll be deposed. They'll dig into your past. They'll try to find something, anything, to justify what they did." "They won't find anything." "I know, but that doesn't mean they won't try." Elijah was quiet for a long moment. "Why do people settle?" Grace leaned back. "Because it's easier. Because the money is guaranteed. Because fighting means reliving the trauma over and over again. Most people just want it to be over." "Is that what you recommend?" "I don't recommend, I advise. And my advice is this: whatever you decide, make sure it's for you. Not for the cameras, not for the headlines, not for anyone else. This is your life, your pain, your choice." Elijah looked out the window. The city stretched below, buildings, traffic, people moving through their days without knowing or caring what had happened to him. "How many people don't have a file like mine?" Grace didn't answer immediately. She understood the question. "Too many." "How many of them get detained and never walk out?" "More than you want to know." Elijah turned back to her. "If I settle, it goes away. The airport pays, nothing changes." "That's one way to look at it." "And if I fight?" "Then it's public. The whole country sees what they did. Other people in similar situations have something to point to, a precedent, a consequence." Grace paused. "But you pay the price. In time, in energy, in pieces of yourself you can't get back." Elijah thought about his brother, about the flag in his locker, about 22 years of service to a country that still looked at him with suspicion. He thought about the young technician who had asked for his help in the hangar, about the planes he kept flying, about the passengers who trusted that someone, somewhere, was keeping them safe. He thought about Maya, his daughter, the lawyer. She had called him 6 times during his detention. She had been ready to drive to the airport, ready to fight. If this happened to her, if she was detained, questioned, humiliated, would he want someone to have fought before her? Would he want her to have something to stand on? Elijah picked up the pen on Grace's desk. "Where do I sign?" Grace didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply turned to the first page and pointed. 2 years. 730 days of motions and counter-motions, discovery requests and document reviews, delays designed to exhaust, tactics meant to break. Elijah worked through all of it. He returned to the airport the day after meeting Grace. He pulled his shifts, serviced the planes, trained new technicians. The cameras eventually stopped following him. The hashtags faded, but the case didn't. Neither did he. Now on a gray Wednesday morning, Elijah sat in a conference room on the 22nd floor of a glass tower downtown. Grace was beside him. Across the table sat 3 attorneys representing the airport authority, and 2 men Elijah had not seen since that night. Patterson and Williams. They looked different, older, smaller somehow. The uniforms were gone, replaced by ill-fitting suits. The confidence that had radiated from them in that detention room had evaporated. Patterson's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie. Williams wouldn't look up from the table. The lead defense attorney spoke first. "Officer Patterson, please describe the events of the night in question." Patterson cleared his throat. "We received a report of a suspicious individual in a restricted area. We responded and made contact with the subject." "What led you to detain the subject?" "He matched the description in the report." Grace leaned forward. "What description specifically?" Patterson hesitated. "Male, approximately 6 feet tall, dark complexion." "That was the entire description?" "Yes." "And how many employees at this airport match that description?" Silence. Grace continued. "Did the report specify any behavior, any specific threat?" "No." "Did the report identify any particular location within the restricted area?" "No." So the report was, a tall black man was somewhere in the airport. The defense attorney interjected. "Counsel is characterizing." "I'm reading from the incident log," Grace said calmly. "Officer Patterson, did you verify the subject's credentials before detention?" "He showed us his badge." "And did you confirm that badge through the operations center?" A pause. "No." "Did you contact his supervisor?" "No." "Did you check his employee file?" "No." "Did you, at any point during the 4 hours he was held, make any attempt to verify his identity through official channels?" Patterson's jaw tightened. "We were following protocol." "What protocol requires a level 4 security clearance holder to be detained for 4 hours without verification?" No answer. Grace turned to Elijah. "Mr. Turner, you've heard Officer Patterson's account. Would you like to respond?" Elijah took a breath, let it out slowly. "I've been asked many times over the past 2 years why I didn't resist, why I cooperated, why I sat in that room for 4 hours when I knew I had done nothing wrong." He paused. The room was silent. "The answer is simple. I was trained to survive." He looked at Patterson, not with anger, not with hatred, just with the calm clarity of a man who had made peace with his own choices. "I spent 22 years in the United States Air Force. I served in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've been in situations where one wrong word could get you killed. I've learned that sometimes survival means swallowing your pride, staying still, waiting for the moment when the truth can finally speak." He folded his hands on the table. "That night I made a choice. I could have demanded my rights. I could have raised my voice. I could have asked to see a supervisor, a lawyer, someone who would listen. But I've seen what happens to black men who assert themselves in front of officers who have already decided what they are. Patterson's face was pale now. Williams still wouldn't look up. So I stayed calm. I answered every question. I waited. And eventually, someone with authority walked into that room and did what should have been done in the first 30 seconds. They looked at my file. He leaned forward slightly. Most people don't have a file like mine. Most people who get stopped the way I was stopped don't have 22 years of military service to prove they belong. They just have their word. And their word isn't enough. It's never enough. Grace asked the final question. Mr. Turner, if you could go back to that night, would you do anything differently? Elijah looked at Patterson one last time. I would clock in. I would service the planes. I would do my job, because that's who I am. That's who I've always been. And nothing that happened in that room changes that. The court reporter's fingers stilled on the keys. Patterson looked down. He didn't speak again. And Elijah Turner sat in his chair, calm, still, unbroken, and waited for justice to do what justice does. Slowly, imperfectly, but eventually. The verdict came on a Tuesday afternoon. Elijah sat in the back of the courtroom as the jury foreman stood. He didn't lean forward, didn't hold his breath, didn't clench his fists. He had already survived. The number was secondary. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Elijah Marcus Turner, on all counts. A murmur rippled through the room. Grace placed a hand on his arm, firm, reassuring. We award compensatory and punitive damages in the amount of $11,300,000. $11.3 million. The largest civil rights settlement in the airport authority's history. The courtroom erupted. Journalists rushed for the doors. Camera flashes burst through the windows. Phones buzzed with breaking news alerts. Elijah didn't move. He sat in his chair, hands resting on his knees, and looked at the two empty seats across the aisle where Patterson and Williams had sat throughout the trial. They weren't here today. Patterson had resigned 8 months ago. Williams had been transferred to a desk job and quietly let go. Neither had apologized. Neither had acknowledged what they'd done. The system had held them accountable, but the men themselves had never faced Elijah and said the words he would never hear. We were wrong. Grace leaned close. There are cameras outside. Reporters want a statement. Elijah shook his head. I have nothing to say. He stood, buttoned his jacket, walked toward the side exit before anyone could stop him. The hallway was quiet. His footsteps echoed against the marble floor. He pushed through the door and stepped into the afternoon light. The city hummed around him. Traffic, voices, the distant rumble of aircraft overhead. He got into his car, sat in the driver's seat, didn't start the engine. Through the windshield he could see the sky. Clear, blue, a plane cut across it climbing toward cruising altitude. Elijah watched it until it disappeared. Then he started the car and drove to the airport. The hangar was quiet when he arrived. Shift change in an hour. The day crew was wrapping up. The night crew hadn't arrived yet. Elijah walked to his locker, opened it. The photograph was still there. The dog tags, the folded flag. He pulled on his coveralls, laced up his boots, clipped his badge to his lanyard. His supervisor appeared in the doorway. Dennis, eyes tired but warm. You're here. I'm here. The news said. I know what the news said. Dennis hesitated, then nodded. There's an aircraft on Gate 9, pressure warning on the hydraulics. I was going to assign it to the night crew, but I'll take a look. Elijah grabbed his tool bag and walked toward the gate. Behind him, the locker room returned to silence. The photograph stayed where it was. The dog tags didn't move. The flag remained folded. $11.3 million wouldn't bring back the hours he'd spent in that room, wouldn't erase the questions, the suspicion, the weight of being treated like a stranger in his own country. But the work remained. And so did he. 2 in the morning. The hangar was silent, the same silence Elijah had known for 30 years, the same hum of lights overhead, the same smell of oil and metal and jet fuel. He stood beneath the wing of a 737, flashlight in one hand, inspection mirror in the other. His coveralls were clean for now. They wouldn't stay that way. The night shift had a rhythm. Check, document, move to the next system, repeat. It was the rhythm that had saved him, the predictability, the purpose. The world outside wanted to make him a symbol, a face on the news, a name attached to a number, $11, 3 million. But Elijah had never wanted to be a symbol. He had only ever wanted to work, to serve, to be left alone to do the job he had trained his entire life to do. Footsteps echoed across the hangar floor. Elijah looked up. A young woman approached, mid-20s, new coveralls, uncertainty in her posture, a new hire. He had seen her name on the roster but hadn't worked with her yet. She stopped a few feet away, hesitant. "Mr. Turner." He waited. "I'm Keisha Williams. I just started last month, night shift." Elijah nodded. "Welcome to the graveyard." She smiled nervously, then the smile faded. "I saw the news, about what happened to you, about the verdict." Elijah said nothing. He turned back to the aircraft. "I just wanted to say," she hesitated, "thank you for fighting, for not letting them get away with it." Elijah lowered his flashlight. He looked at her, really looked. She was young, eager, probably the first in her family to work in aviation, probably had faced her own doubts, her own questions, her own moments of being looked at instead of seen. He didn't know her story, but he recognized something in her eyes. The same thing he had carried for 54 years. "You're on the Airbus at gate 11. She blinked at the change of subject. "Yes, sir." "There's a sensor calibration issue on the left engine nacelle. It's been flagged but not resolved. You'll need to pull the maintenance log from last week and cross-reference the repair codes." Keisha pulled out a notebook, started writing. "When you're done, bring the report to me. I'll sign off." She nodded, "Yes, sir." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Mr. Turner." He looked up. "Why do you still do this, after everything?" Elijah considered the question. He had asked himself the same thing 100 times in the past 2 years. The answer was simple. Because the planes still need to fly, and someone has to make sure they do. Keisha nodded slowly. She didn't fully understand, not yet. But she would. She walked toward gate 11, her footsteps fading into the silence. Elijah turned back to the aircraft. The flashlight clicked on. The work continued. And Elijah Turner, 30 years on the job, 22 years in uniform, one verdict that would echo for generations, disappeared into the hangar, invisible and essential, exactly where he belonged.